Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 125. We're a quarter of the way through the 100s, Bally. It's gone so quick. It's just disappeared. I am NBZ, as per usual. I'm joined, as always, by my stalwart co-host. It is Bally. Hello, Bally. How are you?
Hi, NBZ. I feel like there's a tidal wave of games coming, and the wave isn't even here yet, but I'm already drowning. It's insane.
It's full-on wavy, flappy arms in the water effect. We're just done. We're being pulled under, the shark is tugging on our leg, and the inevitability is right before us. We can try to look away, but it's just going to happen. And it's the end. So it has been weird, hasn't it? Because I feel like a lot of people for 2018, for Switch in particular, were like, well, doesn't look like a great lineup. Lots of ports, lots of kind of older games coming to the system from the third-party end, but I tell you what, the indie lineup is just hitting on a hot scale, and so many, just too much to keep track of, that is just every week it's like, oh, here's a thing and another thing, and just almost endless at this point.
Do you remember the days when middle of the Wii U life cycle and we were playing a ton of classic games just because there were so few hot games coming out there and then?
Yeah, it was a good time to catch up, you know, get through the legacy of Nintendo, play some good old Link to the Past and things like that we had missed out on. But
when we had a good eShop.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to get a breath to do that much more soon for the rest of this year, at least, because it feels like non-stop, not just from Nintendo's end. Obviously, we've got big third parties coming out on other systems as well. But yeah, it has been quite an assault, and we have a few of those games to talk about today. Lots of things to discuss. Bally, why don't you let us know what we're going to be doing for the show?
First segment, we are going to be talking about the games that we have been playing, and there are quite a lot of them. We're going to do 2-segment show this week, just because we're kind of, there's time constraints. You're coming up to Edinburgh, things are happening. 2-segment show, and the second segment will be an emails segment today. Yeah.
We've got a few things from Discord and from things you've sent in. You can always keep sending them more to our email address, which Bally will tell you now to remind you at the top of the show.
ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com.
Yeah, so get on it. Send us some stuff. Always love hearing from new people and the like. So let's kick things off, Bally, with some video games you've been playing. And at the moment, you don't have a job that you're going to. You will soon.
Yes,
but you have loads of free time where you can just binge out video games, and so you have done so.
Yeah, and one of those games, it's a long game, and I beat it, is Okami HD. So shout outs again to Kevin Sharma, who gave me, he bought this for both of us, MBZ.
He did, yes, I've still got mine, ready and waiting.
So yeah, a huge shout out to him, thank you so much. I went away, I beat this game. Why did I take so long to beat this game? Like, why did I take so long to play this game? It's a really, really incredible game. And so initially I found the art style incredibly jarring. Like, I actually didn't like it.
Which is really weird, because I think it's one of those things that people remark about Okami is the pastel look and the way that it's a timeless look. It's one that from the PS2 era still kind of stands up today, even playing the original, because of that. It feels maybe like this mix of Skyward Sword and, I don't know, Impressionist painting, and
right.
It works very well, I think, in terms of something that will continue to look good for a while.
Just for me, what I need the most in any third-person game is a sense of place and like a sense of the world. And the start of the game, before you get to any kind of overworld area that links multiple areas together, you sort of you have like a tutorial area, you have like a town, but it doesn't feel very together and
kind of disjointed, maybe.
Yeah, but a bit disjointed, and it definitely improves on that. The game becomes just so together and wholesome, and you really understand how the map links up, and there's all these interesting things. There's obviously a million things that I could compare to Zelda. I think dungeons are a good example where these dungeons are actually quite simple. I'd compare them say they're similar to something like Wind Waker. They're fairly simple. They loop back around on themselves.
So they're more linear in style.
They're not going to be pleasing Mark Brown, let's just say.
Right, his graphs are going to be straight down the way, basically.
Sure. There's never more than like one locked door. And I thought that works well for the pacing of the game. There's some cool stuff this game does, like in order to gain more life, you feed animals, and it's all about giving life. You're like the god of sun, I think, and it's all about giving life back to the world. So there's areas in the world that you can do your brushstrokes on that will give them life, and then in return for giving them life, you get these points. And then using those...
So is that like trees which you draw leaves back onto and stuff like that?
Right. You can bring life back to trees. You can defeat a group of enemies in a dark area, and the dark area will sort of bloom with flowers and become light again.
Okay.
And so the things that you gain from anything that's sort of nature related, I'd call it, fuels... gaining more health, gains the ability to use more brush strokes without having to recharge.
So you have like a higher ink capability.
Yeah, you can use more ink motifs in a single sort of session.
Right, yeah.
There's like a chargeable pouch that is essentially like a fairy that you can also upgrade. So you can essentially have 2 revives in your back pocket, and you have to charge that. And then there's one more thing it boosts. Oh yeah, your wallet. So but you can choose which one of these 4 things you want to boost at any time. So it helps you. It gives you lots of versatility to change that sort of thing.
Okay. Going back to the dungeons real quickly, because
Sure.
I think one of the things that interests me is the balance between puzzle solving and combat. Because I don't know how much it leans into using combat rooms, because I know what it does is it places you away from everything else. It kind of traps you in a single little area. And I don't know if they do that a lot during the game, how much of the game is that combat stuff, and in dungeons, whether it's a nice balance of the two, and if you're not just going into constant enemy rooms, as it were.
There's only one type of enemy, and it's basically this this weird tree that fires things at you. That's the only enemy in the whole game that you fight that's not in one of these rooms. You always go into one of those rooms when you're fighting enemies, and technically I guess you don't when you're fighting a boss, but you're essentially in a boss room, obviously.
Sure,
So,
yeah.
The pacing with fighting... fighting mechanics themselves are interesting. Like, you gain a variety of weapons. There's 3 broad groups of weapons. One is your sword, one is like a whip sort of thing, and then the other is a shield. And you can set it as a primary and secondary weapon.
So those are just the basic attacks, right? Not using your ink kind of powers, as it were.
No, this is separate to ink. And this relates to what's called Godhood. I can't even pronounce it. Godhood, which is like... which I think is an awesome idea. So the idea of Godhood is that you are invincible for a certain number of attacks. So it goes from green to amber to red to non-existent. So if you're at green Godhood, it means that you can take 3 hits from enemies before you take any damage.
Oh, wow.
So how do you charge up Godhood? You charge up Godhood by chaining attacks together without getting hit by an enemy. So when you're in Zelda in the open world and overworld and you defeat lots of enemies, you might get a rupee, you might get a heart, but you're not really given any reward whatsoever. It doesn't make you more powerful for the next battle. Whereas this kind of so say my Godhood was really low, I could just go to an area where I know there's an easy enemy, defeat the easy enemy without getting hit, charge my Godhood back up to green, and then go fight a harder enemy. And I just thought it was a really good mechanic that worked really well, and it kind of rewarded you for fighting, because you enter these little fights with enemies, they're sort of like these drifting like flagpole things. It's hard to explain. It's like a traditional Japanese emblem sort of thing that kind of floats around, and they follow you a bit, so you do have to kind of watch your way and dodge them, and there are certain areas of the game where you're cornered into them and you can't avoid them and you just have to fight. And you can escape these enemy rooms, but your Godhood goes down for escaping them, for example. So you're encouraged to stay in them. There's a power-up I got later in the game that allows you to dodge these flags. Like you can, they don't chase you anymore, which is quite helpful. So the fighting mechanics, godhood, I think it all links really well.
And did you feel like there was a lot of variety in terms of the moves you were doing? Did you learn different moves with different button inputs? But the only reason I asked that is because this game is developed by Clover, who, well, they were kind of disbanded after this game, and a lot of them went on to become Platinum. And Hideki Kamiya, who directed Bayonetta, is also, I believe he directed Okami as well. And so something that reminds me of those kind of action games is the fact that it locks you into areas with enemies in that sense. So I wondered if there was more to that action combat than just, I don't know, the moves that you do, and obviously the ink mechanics.
Yeah, because you're linking these combos together. You can boost these combos by seeing like a dojo person, and you pay money for him to teach you more moves.
Right, yeah.
But that's based on the weapons you've unlocked, and like I said, there's like 9 different weapons, or maybe 12, but three different groups. Like I said, the sword, the whip, and the shield. Fighting is a combo of using those moves plus the brushstrokes, and there are 13 brushstrokes in the whole game. You get them gradually. I think they are, I mean, they're the defining part of Okami. I think the art style, the way that, yes, the game itself looks like a watercolor painting, but the second you bring up, you press the R button, you bring up, it looks like a piece of paper that you're writing on, and it just
it's a scroll almost,
authentic.
And it has the sepia tone over it as well.
It looks incredible. The way that those mechanics are brought into the game for both combat and just general puzzle solving is probably just the most impressive part of this game. It makes it really stand out as this idea that you have this Zelda clone that has no weapons, you just have a brush. Like, it is so well implemented. And
so like the upgrades that you get are learning new brushstrokes as opposed to like getting a hook shot or something.
Yeah, exactly. You learn a new brushstroke that works in that dungeon, but it also has a use in the overworld. It sometimes has a combat use as well, or instead of, and it works incredibly well. I think that I lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? I was going to say I think that the combat is made better by the brushstrokes, and having those 13 different things, just it works so well. A lot
of variety to do different things. I know one of them is like a bomb that you can set.
Right.
I don't know too much about the other ones, but like that one seems like a very multi utility. Like you can use it in lots of different ways in order to solve puzzles and things.
Half of them are dragging one element onto another area. So one of them's like drag this vine from this point to this point, or get this water to put out that fire, get this fire to attack that, get this lightning to attach to that, and there's ice to go to there. And it's kind of, a lot of them are very similar. The way that they're implemented, obviously you press R and then you're drawing. On the Switch, you can use the touch screen.
Yeah, did you do that much? Because I know you were saying you were having trouble sometimes with getting it to recognize which one you were doing, or if it was a particularly maybe complicated one, it had trouble recognizing the input.
I mean, out of the 13 brushstrokes, there were only like a couple at specific moments that troubled me. One was during one of the boss fights, which was very hard. But I got around it. And then another one, I had to actually look at someone do it on like YouTube, and because I basically went to an area, thought I was using the right brushstroke, it wasn't coming out right, and I was like, this has to be it. This is how you get through here. And it turns out my thinking was correct. It was badly implemented, and
You're just a terrible artist.
I'm just a terrible artist.
I mean, you did GCSE art, Val. You can be great at art.
But I didn't actually use the Switch controls at all. I just thought it was easier to hold R and use the analog stick for everything.
Interesting.
It just... maybe if it had been a DS, and I know there's Okami then, obviously, it might have been nicer, but there's something about the weight of the Switch that it doesn't feel right to just take one hand off and start pressing the screen. It doesn't feel too natural.
Did you ever try using motion controls? Because that was what they did for the Wii version, obviously, and that's how you did it there.
Yeah.
Because the Joy-Con has motion controls in it, and then they do add that as an option for you.
I know. I never tried it, and like I played half of this game in handheld mode, as Caroline was using the TV,
and I assume you would be playing with the Pro Controller when you were doing on the TV, so you wouldn't have like split Joy-Con mode to make that easier for you.
So I just kind of went with analog sticks the whole time, and it worked great. I think that all of that together was pretty seamless, bar a couple of little incidents that I think might have just been me, but I'm sure others might have had issues too. And I just think that maybe one of the best parts of this game and makes it stand above a lot of the traditional Zeldas are the story. Like Zelda really, like the best Zelda stories are not even that great. And like I don't want to say that this story is going to be like rival a story driven game, something like God of War, by in any sense of the imagination, but I do think it is a much better story than any Zelda game, from what I've seen. And I've actually been really missing Japan since visiting last year, and like me and Caroline are keen to go back next year. And this game, more so than I ever thought was possible, was just such a great way of like living Japan and the countryside and references. And
I think it's like steeped in a lot of mythology, isn't it? Like Japanese mythology.
Right. This game, there's so many enemies and bosses and story points that take place that I was like, this is fascinating. I need to like read up more on this. So I just watched like a ton of YouTube videos last night going through all of the references, and there's some really niche stuff here, and there's some really interesting stuff that's revealed about the map and references to locations on the map, and
so like places in Japan and stuff
right
like that.
And I don't want to give things away just because it's a great story to just play through, try and remember some of the most memorable characters, and then look up some of how they're meant to link to Japanese mythology later. But there's an incredible number of references in this game, and it kind of, that alone and its references to Japan put it above Zelda in my mind in many ways. And I mean, you can't compare it to Breath of the Wild. It's not that kind of game.
Yeah, you compare it to the traditional style Zelda games. In that sense,
my favorite traditional Zelda, as people will know, is Wind Waker. And this game doesn't have those aspects of Wind Waker that I love, which is obviously like the island hopping, that aspect. But if you're talking about the Ocarinas, Twilight Princess, Majora style of game, like I think this is a better game than those personally. Like this game really, really does. It's so refreshing to play. It's also so lean. I spent almost 30 hours with this game, and yes, there's some backtracking to meet people and do things, and maybe there's a fetch quest here and there, but there's never this, right, you have to round up all these things across the entire world multiple times that you
hello, Tears of Twilight, or whatever the fuck.
And like Wind Waker's guilty of that too. Skyward Sword's massively guilty of that.
But I think Wind Waker is actually one of the most lean Zeldas there is when it comes to that stuff.
True.
It's just the end kind of Triforce quest that's a bit of a ball ache, but in that sense, it's also being cut down in the HD version anyway. So
yeah, in my mind, Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword were much worse for those.
They are, yes, and I do love them for their nonsense in a lot of ways. Like I really like the side quest you do on the island where you have to get the starburst fucking whatever what do you call them, the Mario Galaxy star bits? I can't remember what they call them in Skyward Sword. Gratitude crystals, that's what they are.
Yeah, right.
For the guy under the cellar who's like trying to turn back into a human. That's one of my favorite things in that game. Doing all those little bits and stuff for him. But yeah, I see where you're coming from in that sense. That it kind of does pad out.
It's such a lean game. It's such a long game. It's a long story. You're constantly given more story all the time, which is great. If you don't like cutscenes and you don't like story, you really will not like this game in aspects. There are some very long cutscenes. There's a lot of text to click
especially
through.
The beginning, which I've played maybe a couple of times before, because I remember, we talk about this game in reference to our friend Ali T, because it's one of his favorite games of all time, and he's played it through multiple times, and always tells us, guys, you should play this game, and you finally taken his advice and done it, and I'll get there eventually. But when I played through it at his house one time, it was like a fucking hour and a half, and I hadn't even like moved my character. It's just so front loaded with a lot of slow dialogue that is very meandering, and it felt not very purposeful. I think it just suffers from the slow start that I think we see in Zelda games as well, like Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword.
And all those mechanics I was talking about earlier, like the 4 areas you can charge and godhood and stuff. Why can't I not say that word?
I know. It's tripping you up like crazy.
It doesn't really explain those even in that beginning hour and a half. The beginning hour and a half is all about the story. It's all about like basics of like jumping and using the drawing and
kind of teaching you.
Right, right, and it doesn't really go into the nitty-gritty of what you're doing in everyday overworld things. And like, there's lots of side questy things that I didn't really get deep in, but man, this game, I have to also say, I didn't die once.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I didn't die once in the whole game.
That's crazy.
And that's because there's some really useful items that you can use, like as basic potion equivalents that reboost you. There's things that boost your attack, boost your defense temporarily, that are really helpful. There's things that boost your godhood without having to defeat enemies, which help.
Yeah.
There's sort of area of effect weapons you can use, where if you're being swarmed by enemies and you're losing loads of health, you just use an area of effect weapon and just blast them away, and you can use those on bosses and things. So like, there's lots of stuff there that if you want to spend your money on, you can, and I personally found them very useful on lots of enemies and certain bosses here and there. And yeah, you can... most people who have played a Zelda game can probably beat this without dying if they use the right items.
Yeah, I mean, you generally don't die that much in traditional Zelda games either.
Exactly.
Like Twilight Princess Skyward Sword, a relatively easy game. Wind Waker especially is a very easy game. Yeah, so I feel like that's probably in keeping with the style of game that it's going for. Last thing is, how good are the puzzles? Like, because I think one of my favorite things about traditional Zeldas is that there's some really good brain teasers in there that make you feel really smart once you figured them out. And I imagine a lot of the puzzle solving here is just based around using the brush to create things and to have things set off.
Yeah, there's some...
Is it satisfying? Is it well designed?
There's some very good ones where you're like, I just need sunlight to go on this thing, and then you're like, right, but it's nighttime, so where am I going to get sunlight from? It's like, I'll just draw a sun in the sky and it'll shine. And there's stuff like, this thing is spinning towards me, if only I could do something to stop it. It's like, all right, well, I'll use wind to counteract. And there's things where you kind of have to step back and think, and then put your elemental hat on and think,
okay, yeah,
right, fire, wind, ice, how am I going to get through this? And I felt like my brain was working in a different way to how it might do with Zelda, where it's less mechanics driven and more elemental driven, I guess you could say. And I really like that. I think some of the puzzles are very straightforward, but there's quite a few in there that are very satisfying when you figure it out. And there's some really cool things from that aspect.
Great.
But yeah, I mean, overall, I thought I'd like this game. I liked it a whole lot more than I thought I would. And I like the first 6 hours are grindy and slow, but get 10 hours in and the story gets better, the fighting gets better, the overworld gets better. It all gets better the more you play. And there's an incredible climax to this game that I don't want to spoil, but MZ, you got to play this game, and I really want episode 150 to come on around so we can rank it in the near the top of our.
Man, that's
50.
fighting talk.
Or at least I'll fight for it. We'll see. But yeah, wow. And if you haven't played Okami yet, and you own a Switch, like I know Kevin kindly gifted it, but it's very cheap on the Switch if you do want
It's a great price for a game that usually I think when people put out HD remasters, they're like, no, we're charging like 40 quid for this, come buy it. And people are like, well, that's a lot of money for a remaster of an old game that's already been re-released on like 3 different platforms, like past generation. Like, this is a PS2 game that came to Wii that has then come to, I think 360 and PS3 had an HD version, and now it's come an HD version to PS4 and Switch and all that.
I cannot recommend it highly enough, especially if you've played Ocarina, Twilight Princess, any traditional Zelda. It's, in my view, a step up, surprising.
Wow. Fantastic. Great. Well, yeah, I'm definitely going to get to that at some point.
Yeah, and there was one more game. I'll go fairly quickly. We were talking about indies at the top of the show. One that really took my liking a while ago when it was shown off in some Indies Direct from a while back was Bad North.
Yes.
So this Vikings and the Celts, they're all coming to your island, and you have to basically fight them off in like a real-time strategy game.
Have you played a real-time strategy game before that isn't Pikmin?
I had Praetorians on my laptop back in the day.
Okay.
Which was a more traditional RTS kind of, Age of Empires style thing. But no, I've not played much RTS at all. And what really I liked about this was that it looked really simple. It didn't look easy. It looked manageable, I think is the word to use.
I think the Giant Bomb Quick Look, they kind of said it's almost a mobile game in the sense that it feels like it's very easy to control, and you could probably do it well on a touchscreen.
And it is coming
Can
out
you
on
play
mobile,
it on a touchscreen on Switch?
No, I've just been using analog sticks again. I've become incredibly traditionalist.
I don't know. If are you playing a handheld much? Are you mainly playing it?
I'm doing a bit of both, about 50-50. And it's a pure rogue game in the sense that you are left with nothing when you game over.
It's a rogue-like as opposed to a rogue-lite.
Right, so, it is a rogue-like with a capital R and L and a big full stop exclamation mark. Because I am 4 runs in, so the first I've got is 79%. It gives you like a little percentage thing at the end of a run. And that was on my second time.
And do you know that if that's like the full game you're through, or would that be maybe the first kind of level of it, and maybe there's another thing that comes after?
I have no idea. I imagine it is the full game, and I imagine that the latter levels are really brutal, just so that you're probably lulled into thinking you're really near the end when you're actually not. And as a fun thing it does, when you load up the game, it automatically puts you on hard, and you have to rank. There's 2 settings, hard and normal, and I was like, I don't want to play hard, and I had to lop it back to normal, and then it was like, God, what a cruel game to try and get me in on hard. But yeah, you've got your 3 types of units, I should say. You got your pikemen, your swords and shields, and your bow and arrows, and
they're defined by colors, aren't they? In terms of like seeing what they are.
No, each unit is defined by its own color, and that doesn't link to what that unit does, which is a bit confusing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because your unit, you have a unit which is represented by a commander, and all the commanders have different names. And every time, I've not even had the same repeating name once yet, I don't think. And I'm
I'm sure there's a massive like random generation.
Right, I think there's a lot of names in there, and the islands are all randomly generated every time you try. I think that each island I think is pre-planned, and then it's randomly generated the order, etc.
Right, so they've like gone and hand designed a bunch of scenarios, and the way they give them to you and things like that is probably ordained.
So it's a case of defeating, protecting an island, and getting money from the houses on that island, and then moving on to the next island, using your money to upgrade your troops. Gaining more commanders. And then you're left with this fine balance of, do I pump my money into spreading across my team in case a unit dies, or do I just pump lots of money into my best 4 commanders? And then when you pump a lot of money into a really good commander and you get to an island and then they can die incredibly quickly, you are left just... Like, this game just makes you feel so on edge the whole time. And like, the early levels are pretty easy, and it maybe takes 20 minutes before you get to a challenging level. So that first 20 minutes is a bit frustrating to have to keep going back through.
Yeah, that seems annoying.
But there's cool upgrades and items you can get. There's like an item that upgrades the size, like the number of soldiers in your unit. There's one that boosts. They have like this power where they can call for more reinforcement backup to come from the houses on the island, which is cool. There's like bombs you can drop, hammers you can throw, but there's just some units later on that you have to be so tactical about choke points and knowing how to protect weaker units, because weaker units are incredibly valuable if you use them in the right place, but it's really hard, and I thought it was going to be hard, and I am enjoying it. I can't say that I'm definitely going to beat it, but I'm certainly going to have a few more runs and give it a go. I do have a sense of determination.
That's me with pretty much every roguelike I've played. It's like, I don't think I beat any of these, but I played them a while and I enjoyed going through them. But yeah, it's very difficult to get to the end of some of those.
I'm going to play a while, or at least I'm going to watch someone on YouTube who actually gets to the end of the game.
And then you can just see the suffering they endure.
And then I can be like, right, could I do that? Or is this just madness, and make a decision
it's out of the
from
league,
there?
Yeah.
That's the hard thing. I'm enjoying it. The art style is lovely. Yeah. It's cool playing
it looks so clean and nice. Like, it's such a crystal kind of smooth. It feels like almost Monument Valley-esque in its look.
Yeah, it's very Monument Valley. Like, the units are so intricate, and the physics engine is quite intricate that there is a bit of slowdown every now and then, especially once
that's a shame.
There's some weather effects in there. But if you actually do zoom in on the units and see what they're doing, it is a really impressive thing they've got going in terms of physics. So yeah.
I didn't realize there was like building involved in this game. I thought it was more just using the units to move around and to kind of stop.
So the buildings are already on the island.
Oh, so they're pre-ordered. Okay.
Right, and then if you get hurt, you can move your unit into one of the buildings to replenish.
Okay, so it's not so much an Advance Wars thing of like capturing spaces or like getting things from or like spawning new units. You just start every map with that set of units and you have to just
you
them.
Pick which you can pick 4 units and you can pick any of however many you have. I've gained up to 7 at one point. I think I've seen people gain up to like 9 and things.
And do you just game over as soon as you lose one island?
No, so say I've got 5 units and I'm using 4 of them on an island and the entire island gets wiped out. The game then will just keep going and I'll start on a new island with my 1 remaining
oh god.
unit.
So, well, yeah,
and
at
it'll
that
just
point
get
you're
destroyed.
Kind of
Yeah, so it is pretty brutal in that sense.
Do you have the ability to say like, oh, I only want to take 3 units to this island so I can have 4 in my back pocket? So if you have 7, for example.
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's also like the ability. So you're on the island. You're defending your island from oncoming ships. Once oncoming ships have come and are fighting and they start destroying your units, you can salvage remaining units to hijack their ships and sail away to safety. So if you think this is a lost cause, I'm not going to gain any money from this island, all I'm going to do is lose units, because ultimately units are far more valuable than the money you're trying to gain. So you can just get back in their ships and sail away and then fight another island and keep going. So there's a lot of skill in knowing sort of escape plans, and I do actually think some of the islands are designed to be unfair, maybe not unbeatable, but certainly unfair, where it's implied you're not going to beat this very easily. You should just get going, to be honest, because you've stuck on this island too long. And I've definitely had my A team in great positions, and all of a sudden they get completely swamped, and
you just fucked.
And I game over very quickly, and I'm like, that came out of nowhere. That's really weird. So knowing that can happen at any time in this game, maybe apart from the first 15-20 minutes, like I said, is kind of scary and daunting. But that's what this game's all about, and I do like that pressure. It adds a lot.
Great, fantastic.
So yeah, might try and beat it for next time, or at least try and get past 79%, and I'll feed back. But yeah, sorry, that was a lot of what I've been playing. But MZ,
you've had the time to just go and dive deep, so that's really good.
Just ahead of Spider-Man.
I know, and now you're gonna all that time's gonna be taken away again. Great. Well, so I have been playing a new game as well, and it's one that I've been hotly anticipating. It is the sequel to Drinkbox's classic Metroidvania from 2013. It is Guacamelee 2. They should have put a subtitle to it. I feel like all the time these games, they have a 2, never have a snazzy subtitle. Snazzy subtitles are nice. I like those. But they always fall in the trend of like Guacamelee 2 Electric Boogaloo, but that kind of reference. But I don't think that's what they wanted, despite the fact that Guacamelee is a game all about references and is constantly memeing all over the place. And it feels like this game still does that quite a lot. But it feels like it does it in different ways. It's less so memey, it's more so referential in a sense. One of the first references it has is to the game Limbo, which has been, its art style has maybe been aped a few times over the years, but it's like the black and white like aesthetic on a background that, the Donkey Kong Country levels where they do like the shadow levels.
Right, yeah.
It's very much that idea.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's what Limbo looks like. I guess inside it's not the same, because inside is much more detailed and, different, but that's the aesthetic of Limbo. And it throws one of those references in there, and then you're in like a world of Street Fighter. The idea behind Guacamelee 2 is that all the dimensions have mixed together, and so the Juan who beat the final boss in the first game has like retired. He's like fat. It's 7 years later. He's like an old dad basically, and all of a sudden like these beasts come out of some dimensional rift, and they're like, oh no, in all the other timelines, Juan is dead. He was defeated by this other guy. You're the only Juan left, and you're like fat and old. And he's like, what the fuck am I going to do about this now? Haven't like fought demons in so long. And so then you're kind of like whisked off on the adventure. It actually starts off with a reference to Castlevania Symphony of the Night, because you fight the final boss of Guacamelee 1 again right at the start of the game. So you basically replay the end of Guacamelee 1, albeit a way easier boss fight where you take like no damage when you get hit and stuff. So it's a lot simpler, but I thought that was cool because that's like a direct reference to what Symphony of the Night does, because that game opens with the end of Rondo of Blood, where you're playing as Richter and you basically fight the final boss of Rondo of Blood before start as Alucard in the castle. So straight from the beginning, you're like, yes, this is Guacamelee. They're referencing a bunch of things. But as I said, it's more video game things than it is like memes.
Is the whole which one are you timelines and stuff a reference to Zelda?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's more of just the conceit for the quote-unquote story is, oh, there's loads of different... So you know the goat guy who, after you break like the Chuzo statues or whatever they're called, he like pops out and like turns into an old man and turns back into a goat. There's like 50 of those guys, and you like come across this one council room where all of the goat guys from the different timelines like arguing with one another and stuff like that. It's funny in a lot of ways when it does that stuff, and every time you get a new power-up, it will be a different goat guy from a different timeline, and he'll give you the thing and be like, hey, here's this is a new move for your chicken form or something along those lines. But yeah, it tends to kind of keep the... So if you didn't like the writing in the first Guacamelee, you're not going to like it here either. And they get a little self-referential with that as well. There's this entire like subsection. There's quite a few different subsections in the game where they're like mini areas that are dimensional doors that you go through that are either a little nod or a reference to some other game or just poking fun at themselves. And there's this whole area you run through where it's basically all the NPCs are internet commenters and they're just saying nasty things about the writing in Guacamelee 1. And so it's basically like you're reading these screen names of these people and they're just telling Juan how bad Guacamelee 1's memes and writing were. And it's funny that they notice that and they realize it, but also they're like, actually, this is what we like and this is what we're going to do, so fuck you guys. It's pretty good in that sense. Yeah.
Apparently there's a place in the game where they apologize for their jokes. Have you heard about this?
I don't feel like they apologize. I feel like they lean into it and they're like, I mean,
well, it's like a joke, but it's just like, we apologize for all of our memes.
Probably,
sort of
yeah. I think they probably say that at some point, which, you know, it's one of the, I think it's one of the more polarizing aspects of the first game, which personally for me, it just doesn't bother me because I just don't pay attention to a lot of that background weirdness. Like, it's cool and it adds flavor, I guess, but yeah, I feel like in this game, it is far more about the video game references. So, like, the one I saw was Hollow Knight and Shovel Knight versus each other. I tweeted a picture of that, which I thought was quite neat.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, which is cool. I like that. But at its core, it is very much a Guacamelee game. And what I mean by that is it's more of a linear Metroidvania. There are obviously places you can go back to and uncover secrets and do kind of more challenge rooms. Like, you'll come across rooms that have chests in them that are like, okay, this is a much more difficult challenge that maybe I need a different power-up for to come back later. Or maybe it's one that I can tackle now and it'll just take me a little while because I have to use multiple abilities where I'm like using my special punches to do platforming and then switching to chicken form and then using different kind of platforming abilities to like switch between worlds and stuff like that. So those challenge areas are ones that I liked to do quite a bit. I didn't go for 100%. I wasn't kind of I don't know. I felt like the Guacamelee series, I've never felt the need to 100% them because the rewards you get for doing that aren't particularly great, and some of the challenge rooms are just a little bit too difficult and absurd. I think the problem is you tend to press a lot of buttons when you're playing Guacamelee. Like, when you do, for example, a special move, it is using the B button, so you can do up B for like the uppercut punch that is red, and you do like side B for the blue punch that like moves you to the side a little bit. You can double jump, but you can also press one of the buttons to shift dimensions, so that's one of the shoulder buttons. And then in this game they have this new ability that is certain kind of nodes in the world that Juan can spring himself off of. It's kind of like an Ori and the Blind Forest thing, but instead of being able to do it on enemies, it's like a dash thing that is only on certain kind of nodes that appear.
So is that a new move then?
It's not a move, it's just a thing he can do with certain... It's basically like a grapple hook point in Super Metroid. Like when you see one of those things there, you can use it to launch him further into the air, and you press that on Y, and then you can change yourself into a chicken, and you can do that mid-air, and the chicken has a hover, which is holding A. So like there's this one room that Dan does in the quick look where it's like, okay, I need to double jump, do an uppercut, switch away, switch back, so I land on this place. Then I need to double jump, swing off of one of those nodes, turn into chicken, hold down A to hover to land on a platform while also switching dimensions. And it's like, that's a lot of fucking buttons to press in a short period of time to kind of get through one of those difficult areas.
Those were some of my favorite parts of like the first game, actually, was those rooms where you kind of had to integrate.
But I think sometimes the platforming challenge becomes a little too convoluted with the button presses, and it gets a little confusing at times. And so some of them I was just like, oh god, this is too much for my brain to handle right now. So I kind of gave up. But generally it is a more linear Metroid style game, which means it's kind of more fusion-like and more Ori-like in that sense, and that's what I like more.
And the first game was broadly like that, right?
It was I think for the most part. There wasn't a lot of backtracking. And there's fast travel points, so it's easy to get around the world if you want to do that too. But yeah, a lot of it feels very familiar. The combat is still based around the idea that sometimes enemies will have different colored barriers that you have to use the special moves to break. Some enemies now in this game have invincible moves that you can't dodge out the way of. Because one of my favorite things about Guacamelee, and I think it's actually maybe the best dodge roll in any video game I've ever played. When you dodge through enemies, it just feels so fantastic. There's this kind of like blue barrier that goes around you once you like phase through an enemy, and it happens a lot in the platforming sections as well, where there are like spiked vines, and the only way to get past the spiked vines is to like do the roll through them. So there are these sections where you're like jumping, roll, jump, roll, do like a mid-air dodge to get through, and it feels fantastic when you're going at speed and just chaining it all together. And it's obviously a core part of the combat, making sure you don't get hit and don't take too much damage, managing how many kind of abilities you have, and you can only use maybe 2 special moves one after the other. So there are combos you can learn. Actually, one of the bonus areas you go to is the flame guy from the first game. Remember him as a boss, the guy whose head is like a fire. He teaches you some combos where you can string them together and be like, okay, I'm gonna uppercut and then jump and then do 3 punches midair, then do a side move and then do like a down move. So you can really use these in combat if you're trained enough and you learn them. I tended not to. I found that the combat overall and the difficulty of the game generally was quite easy compared to the first game. Definitely from the first edition of the first game, which had boss fights that were really fucking hard. It's a much more bearable and easy to get through game, and it does unlock a hard mode after you beat it, so if you want that more of a challenge you can go through it there. But I actually preferred it to be maybe a little bit less challenging, maybe not as memorable bosses because of that, because I only had to take them on a couple of times maybe at the most, so in that sense, like, I remember the first Guacamelee a lot because of like the Javier Jaguar fight and stuff that was taunting me, but it felt really good to finally do that. It is very difficult. But yeah, overall, it's more of a kind of subdued difficulty curve here, and that was nice. It made it more of a breezy experience and easier to go through. And the chicken is improved, so your version of the morph ball in this game is turning into a chicken.
Apparently, it can do more things.
Yeah, so you can like do dashes with the chicken. There's like an upward dash which goes through the air, which is like a purple color, so that adds into the color spectrum of enemies. So sometimes they'll be purple and you have to turn into the chicken to get rid of their barrier, and sometimes they'll be brown, which is a slide on the ground for the chicken. And they do some clever platforming with that as well, where when you do the downward slide, you kind of cross a gap. So you can kind of, there are moments where you're sliding onto nothingness, but then you have to quickly switch dimensions so that a platform appears underneath you. And yeah, clever things like that. And you now have the ability, as I said before, to like feather fall with the chicken. Holding A allows you to glide. It just makes the chicken a much more versatile thing. I can't even remember if you could use combat with the chicken in the first game. I feel like you had to run through and past enemies.
Yeah, I don't think you could.
Because the chicken in this game has like you can like grapple enemies and like do wrestling moves on them. You know, you can grab them and like throw them to the ground and like combo them with the chicken as well, which I found was quite funny. Definitely adds to the comedy factor of the game. Just this tiny little chicken.
Are there any other new moves?
Not really. That's the thing I think that's a little maybe underwhelming about it, is that you have the basic 4 colors. So like B, left, right, I guess left, up, down, and then just no direction. The Smash Brothers way, as it were, like up,
neutral,
B, up, down. Yeah, neutral B. And then you have the added chicken moves. But yeah, aside from that, not really. They do a lot of different environmental stuff. So you have places where it'll be kind of dimensions crossing the screen, so it'll be like this part of the screen is in one dimension, another part of the screen is in another, and it's kind of moving constantly, so you have to move with the screen as it changes and checkerboards between them. There is some magnetism stuff, some gliding, but overall I think it's really well designed and very, very fun, and I think it still does the things which the first game does, which is there are combat rooms that you go through in the dungeons, and then there's also a lot of platforming. There's actually, well, I guess the first game had the side dash where you hung on the wall and then you could just like jettison yourself across a gap, like Superman. You can now run up walls. I'm not sure if that was in the first game.
It was kind of the equivalent of you'd grapple on and then you could choose to zoom up the wall or zoom away from the wall.
Well, okay. Well, I guess you could do that in that game as well, because you do the exact same thing here. Okay. So maybe in that sense it is almost the exact same moveset. But yeah, I've still really enjoyed it. It was a much longer experience. Took me more time to get through, but it's still solid and it's still great. And I haven't played Guacamelee for a long time, so it felt fresh and it felt good to get back into it and relearn how to play it and all that stuff. And yeah, it's very charming. It's cool. You can play it in multiplayer as well. I believe you can do 4 players this time, which makes it significantly easier because you can like bubble like New Super Mario Brothers, and you can also, if someone dies, you just need to wait a little bit of time and they'll respawn again. So on bosses in particular, it could make those quite a bit easier. I don't think it scales the health or the difficulty of the boss either. Right. So maybe it's just a bit of an easy mode for some people. But yeah, it's great. It's still Guacamelee. I still thoroughly enjoyed it, but I feel like maybe Overcooked 2, as you were discussing last time, it's more of the same. And if you love that first game, you're going to love the second one. But it's not going to surprise you, I think, in any way. Some of the bosses are very clever, and I think they have some really great one-off mechanics. And there are some like fun areas you go to that are like, oh, this is different and this is neat. But they never last too long, and they are kind of things that are surprises in there briefly. But overall, I don't think it changes the formula that drastically. So yeah, I really want to see what Drinkbox does next. It was great that they went back to Guacamelee and did more of it because people loved it. But one of my favorite things about Drinkbox is they always do something new and different. And I think this is the first time where it's like, okay, it wasn't new and different. I still enjoyed it, but I think I really want to see something else from them at this point. So yeah, great. Well, yeah, that is Guacamelee 2. We will be back after this break, and we'll be talking about some of your emails, so don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the second segment of today's two-segment show. It is of course time for your listener emails. We've got quite a few that we've built up, including messages from our Discord server. Those are the two places to go if you want to send an email or a question into the show. Email us ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com, or hit the link to our Discord server. It's in the description. It's attached to our Twitter account @TNL Podcast. Come in, join the chat. We get some good conversations on the go, and there's a little thread in there where you can post any questions for the show, like these two people did today. Our first question is from Jasmine from Lancashire, UK, who messaged from Discord. Hey guys, now I might be a bit late, but I've recently found out that Emu Paradise is taking down all their ROMs for their games. Generally, this is the website most people use to obtain their ROMs. As you do Backlog Club, and I know MBZ uses emulation for hard to find expensive games, what do you think about this move? A lot of people are blaming Nintendo and their copyright practices, but do you agree that blame is valid, or is there another reason behind it? Keep up the great work with the podcast, Jasmine.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah, emulation, it's a thing. It exists. It will continue to exist, and there's nothing video game companies can do about it to keep existing and for ROMs to exist. What they can do is they can crack down, like Nintendo has been, on popular websites where it's quite easy to obtain them, and make a stand, I guess, against them. And this is actually a crusade that Nintendo have been on since their inception, in terms of video games at least. They've always been known as a company who cracks down on ROMs and is very, very anti-piracy, and still to this day kind of follows through on that stuff. And it's because they're very protective, right? They're very protective of their IP and of their copyright, and they don't want anyone messing with it, and they want to protect it and defend it. But in a lot of senses, I think a lot of the things that people say about piracy, and especially this applies to old PC games, is true, which is if you provide a service that is better or is easier, more convenient than piracy, then people won't pirate. Right. And they will just use that service. Look at what Steam has done to PC gaming. Previously, so many people pirated PC games because it was expensive to get them, and there wasn't a centralized area, and there wasn't good pricing and all that stuff. Since Steam came along, people are like, oh, these sales are crazy, and it costs like no money, and also I can have all my games in one place, and also I can do cloud saves to transfer them between devices and keep my save files and organized and management, and just making it a fluid, user-friendly experience that is really great. And that is the problem right now, is that Nintendo doesn't fucking have that. Because at the current moment, there is no way to play old Nintendo games aside from the collections that third parties put out and the weird arcade archives that Nintendo has done.
And
when it comes to
SNES Classic and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. When it comes to SNES Classic, you can do that, but also there's nothing on Switch right now. There's literally zero option. And when you look at Nintendo's offering on Wii U, all of their games there are overpriced for what they are, quite frankly, and they are a la carte, and they hardly ever go on sale. They are not user-friendly in the sense that, you know, if someone has already owned it in the past, they can't just keep it and transfer it over. There's no mind given to the consumer in terms of ease of use and transferability and anything like that. So when we're talking about more modern stuff, or just things that are maybe things that are available on Nintendo platforms as virtual console games that people might want to pirate instead, quite frankly, piracy is an easier way to do it and a more smooth way, and is something that is more appealing to most people because it doesn't have a lot of hoops to jump through like Nintendo does right now.
If I'm like a 13-year-old Switch owner, I didn't own a Wii U because I was too young for games at that point. I didn't own a 3DS. I don't really want to buy a SNES Classic because it's all about the Switch. And I log on to the internet and I look up, IGN, top 100 games of all time, and every single list appears with Super Mario World at the top. I'm like, hey, that sounds like a pretty good game. I guess I have to play it because it's the best ranked game ever according to all these different lists, and they're all wrong. But anyway, I want to play Super Mario World. There's no way for me to do that. And that 13-year-old who wants to experience, I mean, it is a Nintendo classic as much as I'm lukewarm on that game. That is ridiculous. And like, it's the combination that Nintendo absolutely have every right to protect their IP, and they should protect their IP, fine. But it's the hypocrisy of like, we're going to protect our IP at one end and not give you access to the IP through monetary legal means at the other end is just really, really grinds you. And for us sitting pretty owning SNES Classics, and we both own Wii U's, which had a great virtual console.
Well, I mean, it was a good virtual console. I think most people would call the Wii virtual console the great virtual console.
So like that. As great as both of those virtual consoles were, there were still games missed. But maybe when it comes to like, have we played most of Nintendo's classic games, and did we have access to them by legal means traditionally? We did, but currently it's an awful, awful situation. And for them to do it at this point in time especially feels really wrong. And it feels like the whole removing Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze from the Wii U eShop at the time that it comes out on Switch it feels like that kind of dirtiness, you know. It's that kind of you sly bastards, you.
So I think the thing with Nintendo is I think they mainly go after first-party games. So that's what they try to crack down on, because that is their main IP and that is kind of what they go after. But I think they scare websites like Emu Paradise into taking everything down, just because it feels like it's not worth it when Nintendo are coming after them. And the problem with that is that there are so many games, like hundreds and hundreds of games, that we just are never going to get again. And it's mainly because of licensing agreements, a lot of movie tie-in games that existed, Disney games, things like that. Some of them have found new life because Capcom have, there's like the Disney Afternoon collection that has come out on every platform except for Switch for some bizarre reason, where it would easily sell the most copies, but that's beside the point. But classic old games that are based on movies, things like that, that we will never see because they're just too tied up in weirdness, and even just random niche games that Nintendo don't feel have a big enough audience for them to release on Virtual Console. They just will be lost from history if this keeps happening, right? Is because the only way they exist in any form is on the internet, in ROMs. And I think the reason a lot of people are talking about this right now is especially historical people, like the Video Game History Foundation that is, I think, founded by Frank Cifaldi and the folks over there, Mike Micah, who are trying to archive and protect video game history because so much of it is missing and has been lost, especially some of the original old stuff. And they just want to make sure that we have all of this so that we can see, what happened. It's very important to protect history for a lot of mediums. Film does it and TV does it. Video games are just very bad at it. And the other thing is that a lot of companies these days have even more trouble when you think about the way that games are delivered and created. There are games that are patched and changed and constantly iterated on. The first original version of Overwatch is so drastically different from what it is today in terms of what characters there are, in terms of what the characters do. Like Mercy is completely different. Symmetra is completely different. But are we ever going to be able to play that original version of Overwatch ever again? No, because the most up-to-date modern one is what they think the game should be right now. And so it's kind of impossible to go back to that history, which is very weird, but it's a very strange medium because of its ever-changing nature.
It's very strange, and when you compare it to the movie industry, I don't know much about the movie industry, but I would assume that the biggest movie companies, Warner Brothers, 21st Century Fox, whatever you want to call it, 20th Century Fox, they have archives of their films and maybe even takeouts and all sorts. There'll be an archive of lots of
the original reels,
etc. And when you have a company like Nintendo, which is arguably the most important company in the history of video games, not pulling their weight when it comes to archiving their own stuff and third-party deals and that kind of thing. I mean, they just really need to pull their weight a bit more on this issue, surely. And it shouldn't be left to, smaller organizations and fan put together websites and things to kind of pick up the scraps and put these ROMs together and archive video games in that way. It needs to come from the top, surely.
Yeah, I think the hard thing is that they are still running a business right now, and so they're going to do what is best for their interest at this current moment in time. And if their interest is, oh, we want to take down these ROM sites because we think that, well, eventually, I guess they're going to put these games on Switch and they're going to offer their online service. So, you'll get Mario 3 again and Dr. Mario and all these things that they have plans to do in the future. I feel like they're maybe trying to force people to sign up for that by doing this, but to be quite honest, the people who emulate games and go after ROMs are the kind of people who aren't going to buy that service in the first place, who aren't even going to buy a Nintendo platform in the first place. So many people I've known in the past have just, especially when I was at school, so many people just downloaded GBA ROMs and were playing Pokemon on it,
Right.
And I'm like, these guys are never going to buy a Nintendo product, but they want to play this one game and it's on the internet. And Nintendo are never going to get their money, but, it's very weird because they're kind of hurting the people who want to go to those places for the historical purpose, to see those old games that are very hard to access. Like, for example, when I wanted to play through Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, only way for me to get that game legally is to spend 250 quid on eBay to get a physical copy, because they haven't re-released it. Like, there is no GameCube Virtual Console. There's literally no way to play that game that isn't extortionate, and Nintendo wouldn't get my money because it would be going to the person who is selling it second hand. So I didn't feel bad about playing that game, and I played it on stream through an emulator because there's no way for me to give Nintendo money for that game right now. In the future, if they do put it out again, I'll buy it for sure. But they haven't, and they haven't made it available, and they haven't made it easy. So I feel like I shouldn't feel bad for doing that in that sense, because if there is no way for you to give the company right now who owns that any money for it in a legal way, then whatever, that's kind of how I look at it in that sense.
Yeah, it's just it's the whole take with one hand and not giving with the other, and it's we've covered it, but they have every right to protect their IP, and they should, but they need to be doing other stuff. And
and I think like this is such an archaic thing to do, like going after ROM sites. Like, what is this, like 99? It feels like no other games company is concerned with stuff like that, because they understand and they realize that like this is going to happen anyway. Like, we might as well just let it happen for the historical purposes of keeping things available for people.
I mean,
so
this
that
is
they
just
can...
Nintendo catching up with the last decade.
No, they don't. That's the problem, is they don't catch up with anything. They just stay stuck in their old ways, and they just keep doing things that annoy people. It's that attitude to YouTube, it's their attitude to online in general, like it's their attitude to so many things. And Nintendo are a brilliant company in so many ways, and that's why we love them. But when it comes to shit like this, they're so myopically stuck in the past.
What's the money saved doing this versus actually giving fans a well put together virtual console that could access,
or just like having the option that competes with this in a way that makes piracy not an option for people, that makes it something that they don't think about anymore, because what they are being offered from Nintendo is such a good service that that's what they'll do instead.
We've got Mario Bros 3 coming out second half of September.
Oh, great. Brilliant. Yeah, love that game. Definitely one of the best games ever made.
Don't know when in September yet, but it's coming.
Second half, apparently, Bally. Second half. Still don't know fucking all about this online service.
Second half. I mean, second half of September, with that specificity, it must be at the start of the year. Oh, wait. It's August. The end of August. Anyway.
Thank you, Jasmine, for the question. A very, very interesting topic to dig into.
Our next question is from Cherno, who's also from Discord. I find a lot of Switch games tend to be much more expensive than other consoles. This makes it hard to recommend a lot of games when they're cheaper everywhere else, especially with the relative lack of sales on the eShop, minus the rare 70% off something like FIFA for the World Cup. Do you feel the same way? Yeah,
pricing on the eShop. I think for us especially, it's even worse. Like, the UK pricing model is just so out of whack. Digitally especially is just so stupid when compared to what you can get on Amazon or generally on the internet. Although it is getting worse here, I think, and it's the Brexit effect occurring, where it's like, well, I can't find Spider-Man for less than 50 quid anyway, so what am I going to do? Like, that just never used to be the case here. But even for Switch games, everything is so expensive on that marketplace, and it feels weird because I see the same game being advertised on Steam and on PS4 and on Switch, and every time the Switch version is like a couple of quid more expensive. And I think to myself, why? Like, is that something that Nintendo is putting into place? Is it something that the developers are being allowed to set their prices? Is it to do with the region-free aspect of the Switch? The fact that they are putting these prices at a certain level, and so each region is adjusting to that level? Because some of the weird thing that you find in the UK eShop especially is prices will be very strange and not regular price. Like in the US, it's like 40. Yeah, it'll be like $14.99, $19.99 in American stuff. And I think because everything is based on the American market, when it comes over here, it's like, oh no, yes, this is $17.48, and it's like, what? Who came up with that specific number for this eShop game? It just seems very strange, and you know, it doesn't get that ridiculous, but I feel like weird numbers happen for different games, and some games are inextricably way more expensive than others. Like, why is Dead Cell $17.99 but Hollow Knight only $10.99? You know, and those games seem equivalent from a quality standpoint, from a critical standpoint, from, you know, resources and team size and stuff like that. Why is it that is the case? It seems strange, and I do think that indies do get to set their own prices generally, but it's an example I'll give, actually, it's not even related to the Switch eShop, but to PlayStation, is Guacamelee 2 came out on PS4 and Steam on the same day, and I was trying to figure out which version I wanted. I played the original Guacamelee on PS3, and I enjoy playing it with a PlayStation controller. I could, you know, plug in my PlayStation controller to my PC, so that's not really a big issue, but I was looking at it, and it was $15.99 on PlayStation. If you have PlayStation Plus, it's like an extra 10% off, but I didn't, so I couldn't get that. Went over to Steam. Steam was less than that. I believe it was maybe $14.99. It was also 10% off, because it was just a launch discount, so anyone could get it. Also, because I already owned Guacamelee Original on Steam, it was a further 10% off. And then I also had like 36 pence from selling Steam cards in my wallet, so I got extra 36p. So it came down to 12 quid, basically, versus the 16 quid I would have paid on PlayStation. And that's a pretty significant chunk of money. It's £4 off that game. So why would I not buy it on Steam? And I think the difference with Switch, obviously, is because it's portable, it feels like it gets away with it, right? Because there is a benefit to buying it on the Switch in particular. So that's why we get to this point where it's like, oh, there's the Switch tax. It's more because you can play it portably, so we're going to charge you more. And I don't know if that's true or what, but to me it does feel like that at the moment.
Yeah, there's definitely, whether it's real or not, a Switch tax, and it just feels like Nintendo can really get away with it at this point in time, because they are the only company offering all those indie games on the go. There's nothing else that will do that. The Vita,
I mean, the Vita exists, but it's dead now.
It's officially
no one's putting
dead.
It
had
on
like there was some. What was the finality of its death recently? What
I
happened?
don't know. It died ages ago. I think Sony said they'd stopped producing cards, physical cards.
Right. They officially said there's now nothing. There's now no game they're producing.
Well, I mean, that happened in like 2013, that they were doing no first-party games anymore.
Right.
But in terms of the actual like hardware that they're like manufacturing, that
sure.
is pretty much stopped now.
Sure. So it's the only place you're going to play something like Bad North, like I was talking about earlier, on the go. And I don't actually know the price difference on that game, for example, but say it is a couple of quid, £3 more on Switch. I definitely could play that on PS4. But will I pay that premium on a personal level for the Switch version? Absolutely, because
God damn it, Bally, you're giving in to them.
I give in to the Switch tax almost every time because I love the Switch and I love portability.
I am a fanboy and I will play anything on my Nintendo. God damn you!
I think fanboyism is an unfair criticism on something that is more easy to play. I'm paying a premium for on the go gaming, and I'm proud of it. Damn it. So there we go. But basically, it's more suited for when, say, Caroline at the moment, she's playing Rise of the Tomb Raider on PS4, and so when she comes in and when she wants to play that, then I might have been playing Bad North on the TV. I can then swap to the couch, and obviously something like the Wii U did that. But this is just I personally enjoy that experience, playing on the go, and I will be very sad the day that that is no longer the case. The day that Nintendo move on to another idea, like they often always do with stuff like 3D
I feel like this is one of those ideas that isn't going away for a little while. They've kind of struck gold with this.
I agree, and that's exciting. And as long as that's exciting, I will pay the portability tax.
You're just giving in. This is not what we like. Just can't.
But also, you do love a deal, MBZ. We must also emphasize that.
I do. Oh yeah. I definitely am far more frugal with my money than you are.
I will be like, right, that's the system that worked last time. It's an extra few quid than the other thing. I'll just do it again. It doesn't matter.
Right now we're both looking to pre-order Spider-Man, and you're like, I'll just get it from Amazon for £50.
Oh, I've already pre-ordered it on Amazon.
Oh, fuck's sake! And I'm like, you can't find this for anywhere under £45. This is highway robbery. I shouldn't be paying these people this much for this video game.
But I got a free Prime trial, and my Prime trial works, so I'm going to get it on day one for 50 quid. And that is a lot of money. But I just thought it was easiest option.
Yeah, I guess. As we're talking about convenience versus not in terms of piracy, that's kind of the thing it goes to, isn't it? It's like, what's the easiest way for me to get this day one without having to sweat?
I am that person who will pay a premium if the access is good.
Yeah.
And this is just a form of that, I guess. The access is good. I will pay my premium. Yeah.
And I would argue that since maybe the last few months or so, I feel like sales have gotten a lot better on the eShop.
They're pretty good, yeah.
Actually, like, when I look through what the deals are, it's like so many goddamn games are on sale, and I think it's maybe a way of some indies trying to stick out from the crowd, because it's so hard to sort through the mess that is the eShop right now in terms of how just the quantity of software that is available. Putting your game on sale at least flags it up so that people can see it in that area. So I think a lot of people are doing that for just marketing purposes, even if it's only 10% off. It's like, oh, this game exists on the Switch, just be aware it exists, and you can maybe buy it at some point. It feels like that right now, and people are using it as a spotlight as opposed to maybe just a good way to get a deal from people. But I don't know, Hollow Knight went down to like £7, and it's like, geez, that game is insane for £7. Like, the amount you're getting is ridiculous. And I feel like it's going to happen again. There's a really crazy deal on Oxenfree when you got that for like $3.99 or something.
Yeah, that was great.
It feels like we're getting closer to Steam-like sales on the eShop, and I think that's good. I think that it'll help.
If you took the 50 quid that you would spend on a AAA new game like Spider-Man, like Breath of the Wild, whatever, and you said, right, I'm going to spend that 50 quid on Switch eShop, including the average amount, like, more often than not, there's a really great game on offer in terms of sales, at least a third off often. I think that 50 quid, you could go a long way and get three or four or even 5 or 6 very, very good games. And for a Switch owner, that is an incredible offer with all the portability we've just talked about. And I think that's just going to get better and better the longer the Switch lifespan goes on.
Yeah, it definitely will. And we'll have better deals, and it'll continue, but I don't think Nintendo are ever going to...
It's the best time to be playing video games.
Oh, yes, of course. And also the most expensive, in some senses, for Nintendo. In other senses, like, god damn, you can get a fucking lot of video games for, like, no money. Especially if you're on PC. On PC, it's just like, stop giving me video games. I forget video games I own on PC. The other day, I was looking at this Switch eShop, and I was like, oh, Battle Chef Brigade is like 40% off. That sounds good. And then I'm like, oh, wait, you idiot. You got that for free on Twitch Prime like 2 weeks ago.
I love that when you can't even remember what you own. There's so much.
But like, PC. I think it's just like services like Twitch Prime have become so ridiculous that it's just like dropping games on me. It's like, I own Goner, I own Battle Chef Brigade, I own Kentucky Route Zero, I own Devil May Cry, I own Super Hot, like all these freaking games that I just have for nothing, basically. Although, you know, paying Amazon, I'm in a weird situation where I'm like using a parent's Amazon Prime account that is like tied to a business account just for my own Twitch Prime usage. So I am literally getting it.
That's
for free.
A deal and a half.
It's a deal and a half, yeah. So yeah, I am literally getting it for free in that sense. A lot of people obviously paying a lot for Amazon Prime, but yeah. Crazy. We live in times when video games are everywhere and always, and sometimes they're more expensive, sometimes they're not. And the Switch is just going to be one of those places, at least for the moment, where they stay quite high. But that's why I think I use that watch list feature a lot, and I know you kind of got me into doing that, because I use that on Steam all the time. Like, I have a massive list of game on Steam that I want to get and have on like a wish list system. So it's kind of like that, and every time you access that list, it shows you if it's on sale as well. It's really quick to go and see which games are on sale. So I'd recommend doing that for games that you think are a bit too expensive but maybe want to get later down the line. It's a good way to do it. All right. I think that is pretty much going to close us out for this segment and finish us up for the show today. Thank you guys for writing in. Of course, a lot of more people can write in, send us their emails, which is an email address that you can send to the Bally will tell you right now.
ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. Please send in more emails. We always appreciate them. They're one of the best bits of the show.
Definitely, yeah. Always need more, so keep going with that. You can find us in various places all over the internet. We're on Twitter, as we've talked about before, and the Twitter account is @TNL Podcast. You can follow us there. You can find me @LordNBZ. Where can they find you, Bally?
Find me @Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91.
Absolutely. I also like to thank our patrons for this show. Our two top tier patrons, Bally. Who are they?
Thank you very much to our two $10 tier patrons. They are, of course, Atari Alex and my girlfriend Caroline. Thank you for your support. And thank you to all of our other patrons who also support the show. We really appreciate your support. And go on over to patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife and you will find our two Patreon exclusive shows. They come out every other month.
Absolutely, yeah. We've got a good bank of them now, and we'll be having a new one in September, so that'll be fun. You can, of course, find us in various places across the internet. We're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, we're on places where you download podcasts from, all those podcatchers. That you can just search us, This Nintendo Life, and subscribe to the show. Leave us some reviews. Again, we've had some 5-star ratings, which is nice on the US iTunes store. Yeah. But we'd love to get a written review. So if you're out there and you're like, hey, I like this show, I want to write them a written review, go ahead and do that. That'd be fantastic, and we'll read those out on the show. Helps us get exposure, helps build the show, and let more people know it exists, and get them to listen to it. I think that is pretty much it. Next couple of weeks, we'll be talking about some big games. There's a lot of things coming out. Don't know how many of them I'm going to be able to play before then, Bally, but like Dragon Quest 11 is coming.
A little bit of everything. Dragon Quest 11's been getting a lot of people who don't normally talk about JRPGs talking about it quite fondly.
Yes, absolutely, which is getting me excited. I've recently fallen down the Dragon Quest hole, having finished 7 and 8 on 3DS, and also going back and finishing the first 2 on Game Boy. So I'm really looking forward to it. It looks fantastic, so that'll be great. And of course, we have Spider-Man coming. There's a lot of hype around that game. So a lot of things to talk about, and we'll be excited to dig into them. But that is going to be in a couple of weeks' time. So until then, thank you everyone for listening, and we will be back very soon. Bye bye.